What the city is talking about. This is Montreal Now on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
That is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. So, Jim, pick your poison. You want to talk about the U.S. election? Too close to call? You think we'll win? Where do you want to go?
You know what? Let's start with the U.S. election, because I got to tell you, I don't know if you have been tracking it as obsessively as I have, and I don't know if you're aware of that little bombshell that sort of dropped in the middle of everything from Iowa yesterday. Yes, Iowa. Where a survey conducted by a very reputable polling firm found that Kamala Harris is outpolling Donald Trump in the state of Iowa by 3 points, which is pretty important because Trump won by 8 points in the last election, 10 points in the election before that, and it was considered so red he didn't even bother campaigning there. And it's kind of funny, Aaron, because after that happened, a lot of people, unbidden, began sort of, one wrong poll can change the entire tone of an aggregation. And I thought, are these people walking back their "it's too close to call" narrative that they've been ramming down our throats for the past 2 months? Are these people suddenly covering their butts because they realize this may not be as close a contest as they would like us to believe? Certainly, as far as I'm concerned, an artificially created situation that made people come back and go past these people's paywalls day after day, so they'd be kept on tenterhooks. Personally, as how can I put this? I wouldn't even say as someone who follows politics. As a human being with a pulse and a brain, if I look at Donald Trump's rallies in the past 2 weeks and Kamala Harris's rallies in the past 2 weeks, and I'm told it's neck and neck, I'm saying, you know what? Someone's talking through their hat here, because there's something here that simply doesn't add up. And I have a sneaking suspicion, Aaron, we're going to be, surprised. Surprised insofar as the narrative, I think, is going to get blown off the airlock tomorrow. I don't think it's going to be close, and I don't think it's going to be Trump. And there, I said it.
Wow, out loud. You said it out loud, Jim.
I said it out loud because, you know what? I don't care. A lot of people, I think, are more concerned about, I don't want to call it. No, I don't think you're calling it wrong. I think you look more like an idiot if you pretend that the incontinent, dementia-riddled convicted felon who is being put on the same pedestal as a former U.S. senator and saying, this guy could wind up in the White House again. No, there's something fundamentally wrong here. And it's time to say the emperor is not wearing any clothes, or perhaps more accurately, the emperor is wearing an adult diaper. And we are being buffaloed by mainstream media, billionaire-controlled media, who have plenty on the table to make sure Donald Trump wins, because he'll give them more billions if he wins. If they don't, well, they're kind of screwed. In fact, they may have a lot to answer for come Wednesday and every day after that. But honestly, I don't think we're looking at this. Bring your aspirin and bring your smelling salts, because by God, it's going to be very. I don't think that is going to happen at all. And I think you're going to see such a blowout that Donald Trump his script is already made to say this is, how could this have happened? You were supposed to be neck and neck, and look, I just got blown off the airlock. I think that's what's going to happen, quite frankly.
So you're basically ignoring all the polls and suggesting that you just said you used the word blowout. You actually think it's not even going to be close?
Well, I'm not saying it's not going to be close, but let's just say it's not going to be this nail biter. And quite frankly, I hate to say it again, Aaron, but a lot of these polls, the polling business in the States is vastly different from that in Canada. There are plenty of companies that get formed overnight, and there are plenty of companies that peddle their findings to these media platforms that are in the tank for Trump. And I've said this long before we were talking about polls. The fact is, I would not trust any polling coming out of the States in the past 3 months. Honest to God, I think we are seeing a narrative being created. And as I say, I'm basing this not on, some instinct or some political insight, just what I see with my own eyes. And maybe it's because my sense of logic refuses to believe that half the people in the United States would vote for the guy who I see swaying and talking to himself pointlessly in the middle of rallies where even his paid spectators are walking out after 5 minutes. There's something wrong with that picture, Aaron, and I really hope that, once the dust settles and if Ms. Harris does wind up as President of the United States, and who knows, in control of Congress, let's take a step back and make sure this doesn't happen again, because clearly, we've been putting up with a South African immigrant who is essentially Donald Trump's unofficial controller and campaign manager, Elon Musk, who has basically been flooding X this entire weekend with pro-Trump rubbish. I mean, it's there for all to see. And I realize, sometimes guys like me, I stand too close. A lot of people maybe see 10% of what I'm seeing on a regular basis. But man, oh man, that doesn't change the fact there is a very, very specious narrative being created that, quite frankly, I don't think even comes close to existing in real time.
By the way, I had John Bolton on just after 3 o'clock, that John Bolton, and I asked him what he thinks. Actually, the question I think was, at what time do you think Donald Trump will declare victory? Listen to this.
Early. He will not make the mistake, as he did in 2020, of waiting until 2 or 3 in the morning. I'm looking at about 9 o'clock, maybe.
Is that crazy?
Well, no, it's not, because by declaring victory, when the numbers turn around and show that he's lost, he'll turn around and say it's fake. It's rigged. Obviously, they're out to get me. This is exactly what a guy like Trump will do. The numbers will be there. The proof will be there. No, it's rigged. It's all fake. This is what has led Donald Trump to be a thorn in the side of most of North America for the past 9 years, is basically questioning the reality of anything and saying, well, no, it's all fake. They say something about me, it's fake. Anything I say is true, and if you don't believe me, well, you're part of the conspiracy. That's where we are.
I'm afraid that's exactly how I feel. All right, let me move on from that and talk about the story that I used as a question today. This decision, this happened, I think it said the announcement was Sunday, which I found odd. Christian Dubé, our health minister, is saying, you know what, we got to do something, and that something is going to be forcing students who come here and get their medical degrees here to commit to staying here because, let's face it, we need them in the public healthcare system. I'm curious what you think about this, because I said, you know what, anytime you turn the screws, when you start forcing people to do things, you run the risk of having those people go somewhere else.
Well, exactly. It's kind of indentured service, right? And they're basing us on the fact, and they're right too, that Quebec taxpayers do underwrite the education of doctors and in fact their progress through the learning curve to become physicians. That said, I find this, and in fact, it was kind of funny because I don't know if you heard André Fortin, the liberal health critic, basically saying, yes, well, this is very, very laudable on the part of Monsieur Dubé, but it also is an admission of failure, because why are doctors going to the private sector? They can't do their jobs. And in fact, after the announcement yesterday, the Quebec Federation of Medical Specialists said maybe fewer people would be going into the private sector if you made it possible to work properly in the public sector. And that, quite frankly, is the issue. I find there's a real irony here, though, because right now our public healthcare system is going through a big transition with, Santé Quebec, which is going to be run by, people from the private health sector. So who knows whether the two realities will meet in the middle and everyone is going to go home happy. What I do know is that a buddy of mine, and it's just an anecdote, but I think it speaks volumes. A buddy of mine, who's not big on his health, but my wife's bugging me. He has gone to get a dermatologist appointment. He went to the private plan to get it because, in case those of us aren't paying attention at home, there's 100,000 Quebecers waiting for a dermatology consultation. Okay, and I said, well, listen, he says, I haven't even checked the cost. I don't care about the cost. He goes, because I'm at the point in my life where I sooner spend the money and go with that rather than get, not spend the money and have my appointment down the road and be told, gee, if only you'd seen me like 2 years earlier, we could have caught this cancer before it killed you. So, I mean, it's money well spent, but that's where we are. It's not an abnegation of the idea of universal health care. It is not, creeping capitalism. The fact of the matter is the system is broken. It does not work efficiently. Everyone within the system knows it. Things have to change. Is the idea of threatening medical students with consequences, that's the word that Monsieur Dubé used, that if they don't go into the public sector for an undisclosed amount of time, they will face consequences. I don't know how smart that is. I saw that the Le Soleil jumped on the bandwagon by noting scandalously that there are 2,200 doctors in Ontario, Aaron, who studied at McGill University. So I don't know if we want to go repossess some of their medical equipment on the basis of, they actually dared to learn stuff in the Quebec nation. But I'm not sure if this is going to be as easy as Mr. Dubé thinks it is. And even though the Quebec College of Physicians today called for no further expansion of medical services into the private sector, I think that's really easier said / announced than actually done.
So I would, if you know, Jim, and if you don't, that's fine, because I'm not sure how this works. When you read that number, that it costs taxpayers on average somewhere between $470,000 and $700,000 to put someone through medical school. Is that money, that taxpayer money, those are bursaries and grants? Is that what we're talking about? Do you know?
I would imagine so, but I cannot tell you for sure. But I know it's a very effective number for them to be bandying about. So sure. I really hope they can back it up, because it does seem a bit odd. But quite frankly, if that's the case, I agree that they should get some return on their investment. But my God, why now? Why all of a sudden now, especially when you want to change the whole system? Why did you suddenly discover that all these doctors are heading, and not just straight staying in the private sector, but doing the va-et-vient, going into private, coming back to public, and playing both sides? It's kind of interesting that Mr. Dubé has had this epiphany. I guess we'll find out more when he gives us more details, which he has been shy on in the past 48 hours.
Yeah, that's true. We don't know what that term even is, right? He just said a few years. We have no clue. Jim, thank you. Appreciate it.
Adamant.